What does it really mean to be conscious? To feel, to perceive, to exist as a thinking, sensing entity in the world? Most of us instinctively assume that consciousness, our very sense of I am, is inseparably linked to the body. That our mind, with all its thoughts, emotions, and awareness, arises entirely from the neurons firing in the brain, the chemicals coursing through our body, and the sensory inputs our body receives. And yet, every once in a while, we encounter questions so simple yet so profound that they challenge everything we think we know. What if consciousness could exist independently of the body? Could awareness, self-reflection, and experience continue even when the body is gone, or even irrelevant? To even entertain this idea, we must first strip consciousness down to its essence. What is it we're talking about when we say consciousness? At its core, consciousness is the subjective experience of being. It is the inner theatre in which perceptions, thoughts, and emotions unfold. It is what allows a sunset to feel breathtaking, a melody to stir the soul, or a memory to bring both joy and pain. Neuroscience tells us that consciousness is correlated with brain activity. Damage certain regions of the brain, and certain aspects of awareness disappear. Block neural communication with anesthetics, and the sense of self temporarily vanishes. Stimulate certain circuits, and hallucinations or dreamlike experiences emerge. All of this seems to anchor consciousness to the physical body, and particularly to the brain. And yet, this is only the story we can currently measure. Correlation is not causation. Just because brain activity accompanies consciousness doesn't necessarily mean it produces consciousness in its entirety. Perhaps the brain is more like a receiver than a generator. This brings us to one of the most unsettling and fascinating thought experiments in modern philosophy, the notion of consciousness existing without a body. Imagine your awareness as a radio signal. The body, the brain, the senses, the nervous system, is the hardware that tunes into that signal, amplifies it, and interprets it. But the signal itself, the awareness, could exist without the device. This idea has been whispered across centuries of human thought, from mystics and spiritual teachers to modern scientists grappling with the limits of materialism. If consciousness can exist independently of the body, it would mean that your sense of self might not be strictly biological, and that existence itself is far stranger and more mysterious than we typically assume. But how do we even begin to explore such a notion? We can start by looking at phenomena that challenge the assumption that the brain is the sole origin of consciousness. Near-death experiences are perhaps the most well-known. People who have been clinically dead, some with no measurable brain activity for minutes at a time, report vivid experiences, observing their bodies from above, traveling through tunnels of light, encountering beings of pure consciousness, or experiencing profound insights into life and death. These reports are often dismissed as hallucinations caused by a dying brain, yet some documented cases contain verifiable observations, details about the environment they could not have known from their position on a hospital bed. If even a fraction of these experiences are genuine glimpses of consciousness operating independently of bodily processes, the implications are staggering. Then there are reports of people with conditions such as locked-in syndrome, where the body is entirely paralyzed, but the mind remains fully aware. Here, consciousness is trapped within a body that cannot act. While this doesn't prove consciousness can exist entirely without the body, it does demonstrate that awareness is not wholly dependent on physical action. And in studies of anesthesia and coma, we see further evidence. Consciousness sometimes flickers in ways that cannot be entirely predicted by brain scans. Could it be that consciousness is more resilient and independent than we usually assume? Quantum physics has also added a curious dimension to this discussion. Some interpretations suggest that the observer, the conscious entity, is fundamental to the unfolding of reality itself. The famous measurement problem in quantum mechanics proposes that particles exist in multiple states until observed, at which point the wave function collapses into a definite outcome. Could it be that consciousness itself exists as a kind of non-local phenomenon, entangled with the universe in ways our biology can only partially access? If so, the body may simply be the tool through which consciousness interacts with the material world, not its origin. Philosophy has long wrestled with these questions. Dualists like René Descartes proposed that mind and body are distinct entities, that consciousness is a substance separate from physical matter. Modern philosophers continue to debate whether consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality, potentially irreducible to brain processes. Panpsychism, a view gaining traction today, even suggests that consciousness is a property inherent to all matter, not just living brains. If consciousness is woven into the fabric of the universe itself, then the body is merely a temporary vessel, a way to experience the material world, rather than a requirement for awareness. We can also examine memory, imagination, and thought experiments. When you recall a vivid memory, the experience can feel just as real as perception. When you imagine a scenario entirely disconnected from reality, your mind inhabits it fully. These exercises hint that consciousness is capable of existing in spaces unbounded by the immediate physical world. Dreams provide another fascinating example. While sleeping, the body is inactive, yet the mind constructs entire realities with emotional weight, logical progression, and sometimes even self-awareness. Could these nightly experiences be miniature proofs of consciousness operating independently of the body's usual sensory input? If so, the mind already demonstrates a capacity to transcend its biological frame. And then there is the question of continuity. If consciousness can exist without the body, does it persist after bodily death? Many cultures and religions suggest yes. Personal accounts of reincarnation, spiritual visions, or encounters with disembodied awareness suggest that consciousness might survive the body's dissolution. While science cannot currently measure or verify such claims with certainty, the sheer volume of independent reports across cultures and eras suggests that something is occurring that is not fully understood. What we can say is that the presumption that consciousness dies with the body is not as empirically settled as we might believe. Even technology is beginning to nudge us toward considering consciousness outside the biological. As artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, and neural simulations advance, we start to ask whether consciousness could be transferred, emulated, or preserved in ways that do not require a human body. Could a digitized mind retain its awareness? Could consciousness survive as a pattern of information rather than a set of neurons? These ideas may sound like science fiction, but research into mind uploading, whole brain emulation, and AI consciousness is moving closer to the threshold of possibility. If the pattern of conscious experience can exist independently of its organic host, it would fundamentally reshape our understanding of existence. We might also explore the subjective feeling of being consciousness itself. Strip away your memories, your sensory inputs, your physical experiences. What remains? The I that perceives, the very act of awareness. Some argue that this self-reflective awareness is the purest form of consciousness, and it doesn't necessarily need the body to exist. It is possible, though almost impossible, to empirically verify that consciousness is fundamentally non-material, merely temporarily tethered to the body for interaction with the physical world. Like a mind temporarily wearing a suit, consciousness might continue to exist even when the suit is gone. Yet despite all these lines of thought, science remains cautious. Our current tools can only measure the brain and its correlates. We can see activity, damage, and chemical reactions, but the subjective quality of consciousness, the what it is like to experience, remains stubbornly beyond objective measurement. This is called the hard problem of consciousness, famously formulated by philosopher David Chalmers. It's the question of why and how physical processes produce subjective experience at all. The hard problem leaves the door wide open for the possibility that consciousness is something more than the body, something that can exist without it, even if we don't yet have the tools to observe it directly. So, as we begin to explore consciousness beyond the body, we are stepping into a space that is part science, part philosophy, and part profound mystery. We are asking questions that challenge everything we think we know about life, death, and existence. We are asking whether the essence of us is confined to flesh and bone, or whether it is something far more subtle, elusive, and enduring. Could it be that the body is simply a lens, a temporary bridge through which consciousness experiences the universe, and that the core of awareness, the observing self, might continue to exist even when the body no longer functions? As we continue, we will examine historical accounts, scientific experiments, philosophical arguments, and even the strange, almost impossible possibilities that suggest consciousness is not bound by the body. We will question what it truly means to exist, to perceive, and to be aware. And we will confront the unsettling, exhilarating notion that your mind might not need your body at all to exist. If consciousness could exist independently of the body, what would that imply about the relationship between mind and matter? To begin unraveling this, it helps to examine experiences that suggest consciousness is not entirely tethered to our physical form. One of the most compelling areas of research comes from people who have had near-death experiences. These experiences occur when individuals are clinically dead or close to it, when the heart has stopped, breathing ceases, and brain activity appears absent. Yet many report vivid, coherent experiences during these moments. Some describe floating above their bodies, observing the scene with remarkable detail, even noting conversations or events they could not have physically seen or heard. Others speak of passing through tunnels of light, feeling profound love and unity, or encountering beings who seem to exist purely as consciousness. These reports are difficult to dismiss as mere hallucinations, especially in cases where specific, verifiable details are later confirmed. The suggestion is startling. Awareness can persist even when the body's physical processes have temporarily ceased. One particularly striking case involved a woman who underwent a cardiac arrest. She later recounted floating above her unconscious body in the operating room, accurately describing a surgical instrument used by the doctors, a detail confirmed by the medical team, despite it being hidden from view. Stories like hers have been documented repeatedly in medical literature, raising profound questions about whether consciousness is purely a product of brain activity or whether it can exist, at least temporarily, outside the body. Traditional neuroscience struggles to explain such experiences. If the brain is entirely inactive, where is the awareness coming from? Another perspective comes from patients with locked-in syndrome. These individuals are almost completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak, yet retain full cognitive awareness. Consciousness, in these cases, is entirely independent of physical mobility. The mind continues to perceive, to reflect, and even to communicate through minimal means such as eye movements or brain-computer interfaces. The experience of being conscious without a fully functioning body provides a glimpse into what existence might be like if the body were no longer necessary at all. It suggests that consciousness, while interacting intimately with the body, may not be entirely dependent on it. Dreams offer another intriguing window into the independence of consciousness. While asleep, the body lies dormant, yet the mind can create entire worlds. In dreams, the brain generates images, sounds, and sensations without any corresponding external stimuli. The dreamer experiences emotions, solves problems, and sometimes even becomes self-aware within the dream. This ability of consciousness to construct an entire reality separate from the immediate physical environment hints at its remarkable flexibility and autonomy. In dreams, consciousness is already practicing life without the body, inhabiting a space where physical limitations are irrelevant. Some thinkers have gone even further, proposing that consciousness might be a fundamental aspect of the universe itself. Quantum physics introduces strange and counterintuitive ideas that challenge our classical understanding of matter and energy. In certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, the act of observation appears to play a crucial role in determining outcomes. Particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed, at which point they collapse into a definite state. Could it be that consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental property of reality, an irreducible feature of the universe that interacts with matter, but is not confined by it? If so, the body may be less a generator of consciousness than a receiver or interface, a way for awareness to interact with the material world. This perspective aligns with philosophical positions such as panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness exists, in some form, in all matter, from electrons to galaxies. Meditation and deep introspective practices also provide evidence that consciousness can operate independently of bodily processes. Advanced meditators report experiences in which the sense of physical self dissolves entirely. They describe a state of pure awareness unbound by body or environment, where thoughts, emotions, and sensory inputs fade, leaving only the raw experience of being conscious. In these moments, consciousness seems to function as an entity on its own, untethered from physical needs, desires, or sensations. These reports, while subjective, are consistent across cultures and centuries, suggesting a universal capacity for consciousness to exist without the body. Philosophical thought experiments further illuminate this possibility. Consider the idea of a brain in a vat, where a conscious mind is kept alive in a controlled environment while the body is removed entirely. If the mind could continue to experience and reflect, even in the absence of a body, what would this tell us about the nature of consciousness? It suggests that awareness may not need a physical form to exist, only a substrate or medium through which it can manifest experiences. Even more radically, some philosophers argue that consciousness might exist entirely independently of any physical substrate, capable of persisting without any neural activity whatsoever. While this remains speculative, it challenges the deeply ingrained assumption that the mind and body are inseparable. Near-death experiences, dreams, meditation, and philosophy all point toward a tantalizing possibility. Consciousness might be more than a byproduct of the physical body, yet skeptics rightly demand evidence, and the empirical record is complex. Many near-death experiences can be explained by chemical changes in the brain during trauma, oxygen deprivation, or the release of neurochemicals. Dreams are created by brain activity, and meditation alters neural networks in ways that suggest dependence on the physical body. However, the fact that these explanations cannot account for every documented experience keeps the question alive. Science has yet to fully map consciousness, let alone explain its full range of capabilities. The very act of observation may be limited by the tools and methods we currently possess. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Another compelling line of thought involves the continuity of identity. Even in the absence of the body, could a consciousness retain its sense of self, its memories, its unique perspective? Consider the reports of people recalling past lives. While controversial, these cases often involve verifiable details that the individual could not have known through normal means. If consciousness can carry knowledge and identity across bodies, or even beyond the physical plane, it would suggest a resilience and independence far beyond what we typically assume. The mind in this scenario becomes more like a persistent entity navigating different forms, rather than a temporary construct of neurons. Technological advancements also push the boundaries of what consciousness without a body might look like. Brain-computer interfaces allow thought to control machines directly, bypassing traditional motor pathways. Virtual reality can immerse consciousness in entirely synthetic worlds, effectively detaching experience from immediate physical reality. And as researchers explore AI and whole brain emulation, we are confronted with the possibility that consciousness could exist as patterns of information, independent of a biological substrate. If the essence of awareness can be encoded and preserved digitally, the body may become optional, an interface rather than a necessity. While these technologies are still in their infancy, they offer a glimpse into a future where consciousness is no longer strictly bound by biology. We can also consider the subjective quality of awareness itself, strip away all sensory input, all memories, all bodily sensations. What remains is the raw sense of I am, the immediate self-reflective experience of being conscious. Philosophers call this the phenomenal self, the awareness of awareness. Some argue that this fundamental aspect of consciousness does not require a body to exist. It only needs the capacity to observe itself. In this light, the body becomes a temporary tool for interaction with the material world, not a prerequisite for awareness itself. Consciousness, at its core, might be an entity capable of existing beyond the physical constraints we assume are essential. History, culture, and spirituality provide further evidence that the idea of consciousness independent of the body has been contemplated for millennia. Mystics, shamans, and spiritual leaders across civilizations have described experiences of leaving the body, traveling through non-physical realms, or merging with a universal awareness. While these accounts are often dismissed as metaphorical or hallucinatory, the consistency of these reports across time and culture is difficult to ignore. It suggests that humans have long intuited a reality in which consciousness is more than the sum of physical processes, a reality that science is only beginning to explore. Finally, the implications of consciousness existing without the body extend beyond personal experience. If awareness can exist independently, it challenges our understanding of life, death, identity, and even morality. Life may not be strictly confined to biological existence. Death may not be the cessation of experience, but a transition to a different state of awareness. And our understanding of selfhood may shift from being defined by the body to being defined by the continuity and resilience of consciousness itself. The very idea reshapes our perception of reality, suggesting that we are far more than our physical forms, and that the universe may be filled with levels of awareness that transcend matter as we know it. In exploring these questions, it becomes clear that consciousness might be far more flexible, resilient, and independent than we typically assume. From near-death experiences and dreams to meditation and technological exploration, the evidence, though incomplete, suggests that the mind is not entirely tethered to the body. Even if we cannot yet fully understand or measure it, consciousness demonstrates capacities that hint at a deeper, more mysterious reality. One where awareness can, perhaps, exist without physical form, traversing space, time, and experience in ways our current science cannot fully explain. And so, as we continue, we will delve even further into the strange, almost impossible possibilities of consciousness untethered from the body. We will examine accounts of out-of-body experiences, explore the frontiers of neuroscience, and consider philosophical arguments that stretch the limits of imagination. The question remains, if consciousness can exist without the body, what does that mean for the nature of reality itself? The answer may be more unsettling, more awe-inspiring, and more profound than we are prepared to imagine. For centuries, humans have reported experiences in which consciousness appears to leave the body entirely. These are often called out-of-body experiences, or OBL, and they challenge the assumption that awareness is strictly tethered to the physical form. People describe floating above their own bodies, moving through walls, traveling to distant locations, or observing events with perfect clarity while their bodies remain motionless. The accounts are remarkably consistent across cultures, eras, and belief systems, suggesting that these experiences are not merely products of imagination or cultural conditioning. Modern research into OBS began in earnest in the 20th century. scientists and psychologists initially approached them with skepticism, attributing them to hallucinations, stress, sleep paralysis, or temporal lobe disturbances. Yet even rigorous experiments have produced cases that defy conventional explanation. In controlled studies, participants placed in sensory-deprived environments reported detailed experiences of leaving their bodies. In some instances, they described objects or events they could not have known through ordinary sensory perception. Such reports raise an uncomfortable question. If the body is merely a vehicle, could consciousness operate independently in a way that science is only beginning to glimpse? One particularly compelling case involved a patient undergoing heart surgery. During the operation, the patient was anesthetized and clinically unresponsive. Yet afterwards, they accurately described specific surgical instruments, the sequence of events, and conversations between medical staff. The brain showed no measurable activity at the time. Skeptics argued for coincidence or reconstruction of memory, but the precision and verifiability of these details make a purely physical explanation difficult. These accounts suggest that consciousness may have the ability to detach temporarily from its biological host, perceiving reality in ways that the physical senses cannot. Astral projection, a concept closely related to OBS, takes this idea a step further. Practitioners describe deliberately inducing a state in which the consciousness separates from the body and travels in a non-physical form. While mainstream science remains cautious, anecdotal reports are abundant. Individuals claim to explore distant locations, communicate with non-physical entities, and access knowledge beyond ordinary perception. Even if these experiences are partly subjective, they reveal that consciousness can operate in ways not entirely dependent on sensory input or motor control. The mind seems capable of constructing experiences in realms beyond the body's immediate reality. Sleep paralysis offers another intriguing window into this phenomenon. During REM sleep, the body is temporarily paralyzed to prevent acting out dreams. In some cases, individuals experience a vivid sense of presence or movement outside their body. They may perceive themselves floating above their physical form, seeing their surroundings from a different perspective, or sensing entities in the room. Neurologically, the brain remains active while the body is immobilized, yet the experience often feels profoundly real. This dissociation between body and consciousness suggests that awareness is not strictly tied to movement or sensory input. The mind can project itself beyond the body's constraints, even if only temporarily. Researchers have also explored OBS through technological means. Virtual reality simulations and brain-computer interfaces allow participants to experience the illusion of leaving their bodies. In some experiments, when visual and tactile feedback are manipulated, subjects report feeling as though they are floating above their physical selves. These controlled studies reveal that the brain can generate a convincing sense of disembodied presence, raising the question of whether spontaneous OBS might tap into a natural capacity for consciousness to operate independently. While technology-induced OBS are artificial, they demonstrate that the experience is neurologically plausible, even if the mechanism remains mysterious. Historical accounts provide further context. Shamans, mystics, and spiritual practitioners across cultures have described journeys in which consciousness leaves the body. In some traditions, these experiences are used for healing, divination, or exploration of other realms. Indigenous cultures often interpret OBS as a natural part of human existence, a way for the spirit or consciousness to interact with the world beyond the physical. Ancient texts describe consciousness traveling to spiritual realms, observing distant events, or communicating with entities that exist beyond ordinary perception. The persistence of these accounts across time and geography suggests that such experiences are not mere imagination, but reflect a deep aspect of human consciousness. One of the most fascinating aspects of OBS is the sense of self-continuity. Individuals often describe recognizing themselves as the same consciousness even while detached from their bodies. They retain memories, emotions, and personal identity, suggesting that these aspects of mind do not depend entirely on the physical brain. If consciousness can maintain continuity outside the body, it challenges the notion that selfhood is solely a product of neural activity. The essence of you may exist independently, capable of perceiving, reflecting, and experiencing even when the body is dormant or absent. There are also reports of consciousness exploring places far removed from the physical location of the body. Some individuals claim to visit distant cities, observe events across the globe, or gain insights into situations they could not have known. These experiences raise questions about the limits of awareness. Is consciousness confined by space and time, or can it access information in ways we do not yet understand? While skeptics point to coincidence or subconscious reconstruction, the consistency and verifiability of some accounts suggest that consciousness might operate in ways that transcend conventional physics. Near-death experiences and OBS often overlap. People who have been clinically dead or close to death frequently describe floating above their bodies, moving toward a light, or experiencing a sense of unity with a larger awareness. In these moments, the usual boundaries between self and environment seem to dissolve. Individuals often report encountering beings of light or consciousness, communicating without language, and perceiving profound truths about existence. While these experiences are subjective, they share common patterns across cultures and eras, hinting at a universal structure of consciousness that can manifest independently of the body. Neuroscience continues to explore these phenomena. Researchers have studied the role of the temporoparietal junction, a region of the brain associated with spatial perception and body awareness. Stimulation of this area can induce sensations similar to OBS, suggesting that the brain plays a role in how consciousness perceives the body. However, such studies also reveal that the experience of being conscious outside the body can be coherent, meaningful, and sometimes verifiable. This duality suggests that while the brain may facilitate or interpret out-of-body experiences, consciousness itself may have capabilities that exceed neural mechanisms. The philosophical implications are profound. If consciousness can exist without the body, then identity, experience, and awareness may not be fundamentally material. The body may act as a lens through which consciousness interacts with the physical world, rather than being the origin of awareness. This challenges deeply ingrained assumptions about life, death, and the self. It opens the possibility that consciousness is a persistent, resilient phenomenon capable of existing in forms that science has not yet fully measured. Reports of spontaneous OBS also suggest that consciousness might operate under its own principles. People often describe moving through barriers, perceiving hidden truths, or accessing insights impossible in ordinary waking states. These experiences suggest that awareness is not bound by ordinary physical laws and may have its own logic, independent of the body. The implications extend beyond individual experience. If consciousness can operate outside the body, it may influence reality in ways we do not yet understand, subtly interacting with the material world while remaining untethered. There is also the question of development and practice. Some individuals appear naturally predisposed to OBEs, while others cultivate the ability through meditation, lucid dreaming, or intentional mental exercises. The ability to consciously navigate these experiences suggests that the mind has latent capacities for existing independently of the body. Training, intention, and awareness may unlock these abilities, providing direct evidence that consciousness is not strictly confined to neurons or physical structures. Even skeptics admit that these experiences are worth studying, if only to understand the mind's capacity for perception and interpretation. OBES challenge reductionist views of consciousness, forcing us to confront the possibility that awareness may be more than the sum of its physical parts. They also highlight the limitations of our current scientific tools, which measure brain activity but cannot yet directly access the subjective quality of consciousness itself. The hard problem of consciousness, the question of why experience exists at all, remains unsolved, leaving open the possibility that awareness can operate beyond the body. In exploring out-of-body experiences, it becomes clear that consciousness exhibits a remarkable flexibility. It can detach, perceive, and reflect in ways that challenge conventional notions of selfhood. The body, while important, may be only one vehicle for consciousness, not its source. Dreams, meditation, near-death experiences, and OBS all point toward a mind capable of existing in forms that transcend physical constraints. The implications for life, identity, and reality are staggering. If consciousness can operate independently of the body, death may not be an end, but a transition. Awareness may persist, capable of perceiving, learning, and interacting with realities beyond the physical. The self may be more than neurons and molecules, a persistent observer navigating a universe far stranger than we normally imagine. If consciousness can operate independently of the body, the natural place to turn is science, rigorous observation, controlled experiments, and the study of anomalies that challenge conventional understanding. While mainstream neuroscience often emphasizes the brain as the origin of awareness, a closer look reveals puzzling exceptions and extreme states that hint at a deeper truth. Consciousness may not be entirely dependent on physical processes. Consider patients in comas or vegetative states. Modern neuroimaging allows scientists to peer into the brain and observe activity even when a person appears unresponsive. In some cases, individuals show patterns of brain activity consistent with comprehension and intentional thought. One famous study involved a patient diagnosed as being in a vegetative state for years. Researchers asked the patient to imagine specific scenarios, such as playing tennis or walking through her home. Remarkably, fMRI scans revealed brain activity that corresponded precisely to these mental images. Although the body remained motionless and outwardly unresponsive, awareness was present. Consciousness was clearly functioning in a form that was largely independent of observable behavior. Extreme physiological conditions further challenge the notion that awareness depends entirely on the body. In situations of cardiac arrest, hypothermia, or oxygen deprivation, some people report vivid experiences while brain activity is minimal or absent. During deep hypothermia, for example, the body slows to almost nothing, yet some patients later recall observing medical interventions, perceiving conversations, or experiencing a sense of detachment from the body. These experiences are difficult to reconcile with the view that consciousness is solely generated by active neural networks. The data suggest that awareness may persist, at least temporarily, even when the body's systems approach shutdown. Neurological anomalies also provide intriguing clues. Stimulation of certain brain regions can produce sensations of detachment from the body, as if the mind is floating or observing from above. Electrical impulses delivered to the temporoparietal junction, a region associated with spatial perception, can trigger experiences virtually identical to spontaneous out-of-body experiences. Patients report seeing themselves from outside, floating in space, or perceiving their surroundings with clarity unbound by physical limitations. While this demonstrates that the brain interprets or facilitates these experiences, it does not fully explain why consciousness can generate such detailed, coherent awareness that feels independent of the body. Even more compelling are reports of terminal lucidity, where patients with severe dementia or neurological decline suddenly regain full awareness shortly before death. Individuals who have been unresponsive for years may speak clearly, recognize loved ones, and display coherent memory and personality. From a purely materialist perspective, this is inexplicable. The brain, severely damaged and long considered incapable of supporting coherent thought, somehow allows consciousness to return temporarily. Could this be evidence that awareness is not entirely produced by neural structures, but rather operates through them as a medium, a temporary interface with the body? Another extreme state is that of near-death experiences. When the heart stops, brain activity plummets, and oxygen supply dwindles, people often report vivid perceptions. They may see themselves floating above their bodies, moving through tunnels of light, or encountering entities of pure awareness. Some describe life reviews or access to knowledge far beyond ordinary experience, while skeptics propose explanations such as hypoxia-induced hallucinations. The richness, consistency, and sometimes verifiable details of these accounts resist reduction to mere brain chemistry. They hint at the possibility that consciousness can continue, at least briefly, even when the body is in critical shutdown. Sleep and dreaming further illuminate the independence of consciousness. During REM sleep, the body is largely paralyzed, yet the mind constructs entire worlds. Dreams are vivid, emotionally charged, and sometimes self-aware. In lucid dreams, consciousness can direct the dream narrative, interact with dream characters, and even manipulate the environment. These experiences suggest that awareness is capable of operating independently of sensory input or bodily interaction. In dreams, the mind demonstrates a form of existence that is not confined to physical reality. Proof, perhaps, that consciousness is inherently flexible and capable of functioning outside its usual physical constraints. Meditation and extreme mental training provide additional evidence. Advanced practitioners report experiences in which the sense of self dissolves entirely, leaving only pure awareness. Thoughts, sensations, and emotions may fade, yet consciousness remains. Some describe floating sensations, perceptions of expansive space, or contact with non-physical realms. Neuroscience studies of such individuals reveal changes in brainwave patterns, yet the subjective experience transcends simple interpretation. The mind appears capable of exploring realms that the body does not access directly, suggesting that consciousness can operate in a form independent of physical structure. Philosophical and theoretical frameworks support these observations. The hard problem of consciousness, the question of why and how subjective experience arises, remains unsolved. Physical explanations account for behavior and brain activity, but they do not account for the qualitative nature of awareness. Could consciousness be a fundamental feature of reality, irreducible to neurons and chemicals? Some theorists suggest it might be. Panpsychism posits that consciousness exists at a basic level throughout the universe. Integrated information theory proposes that consciousness corresponds to the integration of information itself, which could, in principle, exist independently of biological systems. If awareness is fundamental, the body is not its origin, but a vehicle for interacting with the material world. Even technological advances are beginning to test the limits of consciousness without the body. Brain-computer interfaces and virtual reality allow direct interaction with synthetic environments, bypassing traditional sensory input. Researchers have observed that consciousness can adapt to perceive, navigate, and act in entirely artificial spaces. If the mind can function in virtual or simulated realities, it suggests that awareness is not inherently bound to biological mechanisms. The substrate, the body, matters less than the process of perceiving, reflecting, and experiencing. Consider extreme cases of sensory deprivation. Subjects placed in isolation tanks, devoid of light and sound, report vivid internal experiences. Some describe leaving their bodies, perceiving their environment from new perspectives, or traveling through mental landscapes. In the absence of external stimuli, consciousness continues to function, constructing reality from within itself. This demonstrates that awareness can operate independently, generating perception, emotion, and thought even when the body's usual sensory inputs are inactive. There are also accounts of individuals retaining knowledge or experiences under conditions where the brain should not support it. For example, children born with severe brain abnormalities or individuals with significant portions of the brain removed due to surgery often display cognitive capacities that defy expectations. Consciousness, memory, and awareness sometimes persist despite dramatic alterations to the physical substrate. These anomalies suggest that awareness may not be fully reducible to the structure of the brain alone. In the extreme margins of scientific inquiry, some researchers explore the possibility that consciousness might even interact with reality beyond the body in subtle ways. Studies in parapsychology, while controversial, examine phenomena such as precognition, telepathy, and remote perception. While mainstream science remains skeptical, controlled experiments have occasionally produced statistically significant results. If consciousness can access information without direct sensory input, it reinforces the idea that awareness may extend beyond the confines of the body. Even if these phenomena are rare or difficult to reproduce, they hint at capacities of mind that conventional materialism struggles to explain. The philosophical implications of these extreme states are profound. If awareness can persist independently of the body, identity and experience may not be fundamentally biological. Life may not end with bodily death, and consciousness could persist in forms or dimensions we do not yet understand. The self, then, is not merely a collection of neurons and molecules, but a persistent, flexible phenomenon capable of existing in conditions far removed from the physical environment. History and culture provide further support. Mystics, shamans, and spiritual practitioners across the world describe journeys beyond the body, encounters with non-physical entities, and exploration of realms inaccessible through ordinary perception. These experiences, often consistent across centuries and cultures, suggest that consciousness has the capacity to operate in ways that transcend physical constraints. The body, while necessary for ordinary interaction with the material world, may be a temporary vessel rather than a requirement for awareness itself. In studying extreme states of consciousness, one truth becomes clear. Awareness is remarkably resilient. It can operate under conditions of physical impairment, sensory deprivation, neurological anomaly, and even near death. While science continues to map correlations between brain activity and conscious experience, these anomalies hint that awareness may have capabilities beyond the biological, hinting at a deeper, more mysterious dimension of existence. As we explore consciousness beyond the body, one of the most provocative and unsettling areas of inquiry emerges from quantum physics. While the behavior of subatomic particles often defies common sense, it also hints at a possible connection between awareness and the fabric of reality itself. In the early 20th century, physicists discovered that particles exist in multiple states simultaneously, a phenomenon called superposition, until observed. This raises a profound question. What role does consciousness play in shaping reality? Does observation merely reveal reality, or does it actively participate in its creation? The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates this strange interplay. Particles fired through two slits produce an interference pattern, as if they exist in multiple states at once. Yet when scientists observe which slit a particle passes through, the interference disappears, and the particle behaves as though it chose a single path. The act of observation appears to influence reality itself. While physicists debate interpretations, one possibility is that consciousness is not merely a passive observer, but a fundamental component of reality, capable of interacting with matter in ways we do not yet fully understand. If so, consciousness may not be confined to the brain or body. It could exist as a basic feature of the universe, interacting with physical forms but not dependent on them. Building on this idea, some theorists propose that consciousness is non-local, that it is not limited by space or time. Entanglement, a quantum phenomenon in which particles remain connected regardless of distance, suggests that information can be correlated instantly across vast distances. Could consciousness operate in a similar manner? If awareness is non-local, it could theoretically exist independently of the body, able to perceive or influence events without relying on the physical senses. This notion aligns with reports of out-of-body experiences, near-death perceptions, and even remote viewing, where individuals appear to access information from distant locations without conventional sensory input. Theoretical models such as the Orc-SAR hypothesis, proposed by physicist Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, suggest that consciousness arises from quantum processes within microtubules, tiny structures inside neurons. According to this model, consciousness is fundamentally a quantum phenomenon, not merely an emergent property of complex neural networks. If true, this implies that awareness may be capable of existing in forms independent of classical biological structures. The body, then, may act as a receiver or amplifier for consciousness, rather than its generator. Awareness could persist in ways our current neuroscience cannot fully measure or replicate. This quantum perspective resonates with philosophical ideas that stretch back centuries. Some mystics and philosophers have long suggested that consciousness is primary and matter is secondary, a view that aligns with the notion that the mind is not inherently tied to the body. If consciousness is indeed fundamental, then our everyday physical reality is merely one expression of a deeper, underlying awareness. The body is a tool for interacting with this reality, but it is not the origin of awareness itself. Such a view challenges deeply held assumptions about life, identity, and existence. Consider, for instance, the phenomenon of mind-matter interaction. In carefully controlled experiments, some researchers have observed small but statistically significant effects of human intention on random physical systems. Devices designed to produce random outcomes sometimes display deviations correlated with focused human consciousness. While these effects are subtle and controversial, they suggest the tantalizing possibility that awareness can influence physical reality directly, without relying on conventional motor activity or sensory input. If consciousness can affect matter without a body, then its existence may not be confined to biological processes at all. Another fascinating aspect of quantum consciousness involves time. Quantum theory allows for non-linear interactions in which cause and effect are not strictly sequential. Some interpretations suggest that awareness may experience or influence events in ways that do not conform to ordinary temporal logic. Near-death experiences, precognitive visions, and reports of glimpsing future or past events could, in theory, be understood through this lens. Consciousness might operate beyond the normal constraints of space and time, further supporting the idea that it can exist independently of a physical body. Meditation, lucid dreaming, and altered states of awareness provide experiential support for this notion. Individuals in deep meditative states often report a sense of timelessness, unity with the universe, or perception of realities beyond the physical. Lucid dreamers can navigate dream landscapes with full self-awareness, observing events and interacting in ways that feel as real as waking life. In these states, the mind demonstrates flexibility and autonomy, functioning independently of ordinary sensory and bodily input. This mirrors the potential non-local, quantum-like qualities of consciousness suggested by physics. The intersection of quantum mechanics and consciousness also challenges materialist reductionism, the view that everything about the mind can be explained in terms of neurons and chemicals. While neuroscience reveals correlations between brain activity and awareness, it does not fully explain the qualitative experience of consciousness, known as qualia. Quantum models suggest that awareness could be a fundamental property of reality, existing independently of physical form. The brain in this framework is not the origin of consciousness, but a specialized interface, allowing it to interact with the physical world in complex and meaningful ways. Consider the implications if consciousness truly is non-local and quantum in nature. The mind might survive bodily death, persisting as awareness capable of perceiving or interacting with reality in forms we cannot currently measure. Near-death experiences, terminal lucidity, and out-of-body experiences could represent glimpses of this enduring, independent awareness. Meditation and lucid dreaming could be exercises in consciously accessing this non-local aspect of the mind. Even advanced technologies might eventually tap into consciousness in ways that bypass the biological body entirely. The idea that consciousness exists independently of the body also reframes the question of identity. If awareness is not generated by neurons, then the self may not be tied to a particular body or brain. Memory, personality, and subjective experience could persist as patterns or forms of consciousness that are resilient to physical limitations. In this view, the mind is more than the body. It is a persistent phenomenon capable of navigating reality in ways that transcend biology. Some scientists approach these ideas with caution, acknowledging that quantum theories of consciousness remain speculative and difficult to test. Yet the combination of physics, neuroscience, and anomalous experiences, near-death perceptions, OBL, meditation, and terminal lucidity suggests that the conventional materialist view is incomplete. Consciousness may not be a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental aspect of reality itself, interacting with the body and matter without being limited by them. If we accept this possibility, the implications are staggering. Death may not be the end of awareness, but a transition from one mode of existence to another. Identity and memory may persist beyond the body, and awareness may traverse space, time, and dimensions inaccessible to ordinary perception. Consciousness, in this framework, is not bound by the limits of flesh, neurons, or physical form. It is a fundamental, enduring aspect of existence itself. Moreover, this perspective reframes our understanding of life and reality. The body becomes a temporary vessel, a lens through which consciousness experiences the material world. Physical sensations, thoughts, and emotions are part of this interaction, but they are not the essence of awareness. The mind, potentially quantum and non-local, may persist beyond the limitations of the body, capable of exploring dimensions of reality that remain hidden to conventional science. The intersection of quantum theory and consciousness also invites us to consider the extraordinary possibilities of mind. Could awareness exist entirely independent of the body, traversing realities, perceiving truths, and interacting with the universe in ways we cannot yet measure? Could consciousness survive bodily death, continuing as a form of pure awareness? If so, then our understanding of self, reality, and existence must expand far beyond what we typically assume. Across cultures, history, and personal accounts, these ideas resonate. Mystics, spiritual teachers, and philosophers have long suggested that awareness is primary and matter secondary. Quantum physics now provides a framework that, at least theoretically, allows for consciousness to be fundamental, non-local, and independent of the body. The convergence of experiential, philosophical, and scientific evidence points toward a mind that is flexible, resilient, and potentially eternal. Advances in technology and neuroscience are beginning to raise questions that were once purely philosophical. Could the mind exist entirely outside a biological brain? Could consciousness survive in artificial or digital forms, untethered from flesh and neurons? The implications are as profound as they are unsettling. The concept of mind uploading has captured the imagination of futurists and scientists alike. Mind uploading proposes that consciousness could, in principle, be transferred from the human brain into a digital medium. If the patterns of neural connections, synaptic weights, and functional dynamics could be mapped with sufficient precision, the argument goes, consciousness might continue in a simulated environment. In this scenario, the body becomes optional, an interface for interacting with the physical world, rather than a requirement for awareness itself. While this may sound like science fiction, researchers have made significant strides towards simulating neural networks and replicating aspects of brain function in computers. Artificial intelligence today can process information, learn, and make decisions in ways that echo certain cognitive processes. Neural simulations, though far less complex than the human brain, demonstrate that the structure of experience can, in principle, be encoded digitally. If consciousness is fundamentally a pattern of information rather than a strictly biological phenomenon, then it might be possible to preserve it beyond the body. Consider this: when we are conscious, what we experience is essentially the processing of information. Sensory inputs, memories, emotions, and thought patterns are integrated into a coherent, self-aware system. If these informational processes could be replicated in a sufficiently complex artificial system, could the self continue? Could awareness persist as a digital entity? Philosophers and neuroscientists argue that the substrate may not matter. The pattern, the dynamic processing of information, is what constitutes consciousness. In this sense, the body is merely the vessel, and the mind is the pattern that could, theoretically, be instantiated elsewhere. Artificial intelligence raises complementary questions. While current AI is not conscious in any human sense, research in cognitive modeling, self-reflective systems, and artificial neural networks pushes the boundaries of what machines can perceive and process. Some theorists propose that sufficiently advanced AI, replicating the complexity and integration of human cognition, could achieve a form of awareness. If consciousness is not bound to biology, then in principle it could emerge in synthetic systems, existing entirely independently of a human body. This challenges our assumptions about identity and selfhood. Awareness could inhabit non-biological forms, interacting with reality in ways that are not restricted by flesh and neurons. Mind uploading also raises philosophical and ethical dilemmas. If consciousness can be digitized, is the uploaded mind the same person, or merely a copy? Does continuity of awareness persist when transferred to a new substrate, or does the original consciousness remain tied to the biological body? These questions challenge our fundamental understanding of selfhood. The very notion that consciousness could survive outside a body forces us to reconsider what it means to exist and what constitutes the essence of you. Experiments in virtual reality provide early glimpses of the mind's ability to inhabit alternative forms. Immersive VR allows users to experience bodies, perspectives, and environments radically different from their physical selves. Participants often report a strong sense of identification with these virtual forms, suggesting that consciousness is adaptable and capable of extending beyond its biological limits. If our awareness can convincingly inhabit virtual bodies, imagine what might be possible if the entire mind were encoded digitally. The body becomes an interface, not a requirement, and consciousness can persist, perceive, and act in entirely new ways. Memory and identity are also central to this discussion. For consciousness to survive outside the body, the continuity of memory, perception, and self-awareness must be preserved. Neural mapping and brain simulations aim to replicate these patterns, capturing the informational structure that constitutes personality and cognition. If successful, an uploaded mind could retain the essence of identity, experiencing continuity even without biological structures. In this framework, the mind is resilient, capable of existing in forms the body cannot support. Awareness becomes independent, flexible, and potentially immortal. Some theorists push these ideas further, speculating that consciousness could exist in distributed or networked forms. Rather than residing in a single body or machine, awareness could operate across multiple substrates, interacting simultaneously with different environments and realities. This mirrors certain philosophical and mystical descriptions of consciousness as non-local and multidimensional. The body, in this view, is just one of many possible interfaces through which awareness interacts with the physical world. Consciousness itself is the persistent phenomenon, adapting to whatever medium allows it to exist and perceive. The implications extend beyond individual experience. If consciousness can exist digitally, survive bodily death, and operate independently of biology, then our understanding of reality, identity, and life itself changes dramatically. Death may no longer be a definitive endpoint. It could become a transition from one form of existence to another. Awareness could persist in virtual or artificial realms, interacting with realities that exist parallel to, or beyond, our physical universe. Consciousness becomes an enduring entity, capable of adaptation, survival, and exploration beyond the limitations of flesh. Technological developments in brain-computer interfaces further blur the line between biological and non-biological consciousness. Devices that translate neural activity into digital signals allow thought to control external systems directly. Users can manipulate machines, communicate, and even experience new sensory modalities without relying on their biological bodies. These early experiments hint at the feasibility of consciousness interacting with non-physical forms, demonstrating that the mind is adaptable and capable of functioning beyond its traditional biological limits. Artificial simulations also provide a new lens for examining selfhood. In a virtual environment, a digital mind could perceive, reflect, and interact with reality in ways that are coherent and meaningful. The brain in this scenario becomes a model for replicating awareness, not the source of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamentally a pattern of information, then the physical body is incidental, a vehicle for interaction, not the essence of experience. Awareness could exist independently, and navigating digital or artificial realities with persistence and continuity. Even more speculative are ideas of consciousness existing in forms entirely unlike biological or digital systems. Some theorists suggest that awareness could manifest as energy, information, or patterns within the fabric of the universe itself. The body, in this perspective, is a temporary vehicle for interacting with material reality, but the essence of consciousness is not confined to it. Near-death experiences, out-of-body perceptions, and reports of non-physical awareness hint at this possibility. Awareness may be a fundamental property of reality, capable of existing independently in ways we are only beginning to imagine. The ethical implications of non-biological consciousness are equally profound. If minds can be uploaded or instantiated digitally, what rights, autonomy, or experiences do they possess? Could awareness in artificial form suffer, evolve, or interact with other conscious entities? These questions challenge not only science, but morality, philosophy, and law. The existence of consciousness beyond the body would require a rethinking of life itself, as well as the responsibilities of those who create or interact with digital minds. Historical and philosophical traditions offer intriguing parallels. Mystics, spiritual teachers, and philosophers have long described consciousness as a persistent, flexible phenomenon, capable of existing independently of the body. Quantum theories, mind uploading, and digital consciousness may be the modern manifestation of this age-old intuition. Across time, cultures, and technologies, awareness reveals itself as adaptable, resilient, and not strictly bound to flesh or neurons. Finally, these ideas invite reflection on what it means to exist. If consciousness can survive without the body, it challenges the assumption that we are inherently biological beings. Identity, memory, and subjective experience may persist beyond death, interacting with reality in ways we cannot yet measure. Awareness becomes an enduring phenomenon, capable of navigating multiple forms, dimensions, or substrates. The mind is not merely a product of neurons. It is a fundamental, persistent entity capable of existing in ways that defy ordinary understanding. As we consider these possibilities, it becomes clear that consciousness is not confined to the body. Mind uploading, artificial intelligence, and digital forms of awareness provide a glimpse of what may lie beyond biology. The body may be temporary, a vessel for interacting with the physical world, but the mind, the essence of awareness, may endure, adapt, and persist in ways that challenge our most basic assumptions about life, death, and reality. Across cultures, throughout history, humans have described encounters with realities that seem independent of the physical body, suggesting that awareness is far more expansive than our daily perception allows. These experiences challenge the assumption that the brain is the sole generator of consciousness and hint at the possibility of awareness persisting beyond physical limitations. One of the most profound categories of such experiences is the phenomenon of reincarnation. Children and adults alike have reported memories of past lives, often providing detailed, verifiable information about people, places, and events they could not have known through ordinary means. Some remember specific names, locations, or historical details, which have been independently confirmed. In these cases, consciousness seems to retain memory and identity beyond a single physical lifespan. If awareness can persist and carry knowledge from one life to another, it raises profound questions about the nature of selfhood, identity, and existence itself. The body in this context becomes a temporary vessel, while consciousness, the true observer, continues to move through time and space. Near-death experiences also provide striking evidence of consciousness operating independently of the body. Individuals who have been clinically dead or near death often report vivid perceptions, floating above their physical selves, observing their surroundings with astonishing clarity, or moving toward realms of light and love. Some describe encounters with beings of pure awareness, entities that communicate without words and convey profound truths. These experiences are remarkably consistent across cultures, religions, and eras. Even when the body shows minimal or no brain activity, consciousness appears to remain coherent, capable of perception, reflection, and even interaction. The implications are unsettling yet awe-inspiring. Awareness may not be confined to biological processes, but could persist in some form beyond the body. Astral projection and intentional out-of-body experiences further suggest that consciousness is not intrinsically tied to the physical form. Practitioners report leaving their bodies deliberately, exploring distant locations, or entering realms inaccessible to ordinary perception. These experiences are often described in vivid detail, including the ability to interact with other consciousnesses or non-physical entities. Whether interpreted spiritually or psychologically, the experiences demonstrate that the mind can function in ways untethered from the body, perceiving, navigating, and reflecting independently. The body, in these contexts, acts as a point of reference, not a requirement for awareness itself. Mystical and meditative traditions provide centuries of insight into consciousness beyond the body. Advanced practitioners describe states in which the sense of self dissolves entirely, leaving only awareness. Thoughts, emotions, and sensory inputs fade, yet the observer remains fully conscious. Some report experiencing a sense of unity with the universe, perceiving realities beyond physical matter, or even accessing knowledge and insight impossible to obtain through ordinary means. These descriptions suggest that consciousness is flexible and capable of existing independently of the body, exploring realms and dimensions beyond ordinary sensory perception. Spiritual encounters also offer intriguing glimpses into awareness untethered from the body. Accounts of visions, communication with deceased individuals, and contact with non-physical entities are documented across cultures. While skeptics attribute these experiences to imagination or neurological anomalies, the consistency and depth of the reports suggest a more profound phenomenon. Consciousness appears capable of interacting with realities beyond the physical, perceiving, reflecting, and even exchanging information in ways that defy conventional explanation. The body may provide sensory input and context, but awareness seems capable of operating independently. Terminal lucidity offers further evidence. Patients with severe neurological degeneration or prolonged illness sometimes regain clarity and coherent thought shortly before death. Individuals who have been unresponsive for years may recognize loved ones, communicate clearly, and display memory and personality previously thought lost. This phenomenon challenges the assumption that consciousness is strictly a product of brain function. Even when the body, and particularly the brain, is severely compromised, awareness can return, suggesting that consciousness may operate independently or persist in ways not fully explained by physical structures. Reincarnation, near-death experiences, astral projection, meditation, and terminal lucidity converge on a central theme. Awareness appears to be more than the sum of physical processes. It demonstrates resilience, continuity, and the ability to exist in forms not bound by the body. Memory, identity, and perception may persist across lifetimes, after clinical death, or during states in which the body is temporarily incapacitated. The evidence, while largely anecdotal, is remarkably consistent, suggesting that consciousness may indeed operate independently of its biological host. Some researchers explore these phenomena from a scientific perspective, seeking correlations between experience and measurable variables. Studies on past life memories, for instance, document children who provide specific, verifiable information about previous lives. Near-death research examines accounts of people who report accurate observations during periods of apparent brain inactivity. Neuroimaging studies of meditators reveal alterations in brain function during states of non-ordinary awareness, yet the subjective experience often transcends what neural activity alone can explain. While science has yet to provide definitive answers, these investigations suggest that consciousness may not be entirely reducible to neurons and molecules. Philosophical reflections reinforce these insights. If awareness can persist, move, and perceive independently of the body, then selfhood may not be confined to a single lifetime or physical form. Identity could be seen as a pattern of consciousness, capable of persisting, evolving, and interacting across different contexts and substrates. Death may not be an end, but a transition, a shift from one mode of existence to another. The body becomes a temporary interface through which awareness experiences the physical world, while the essence of consciousness continues, unbound. Mystical traditions often describe this independence poetically. The self as a traveler, a spark of awareness moving through dimensions, or an observer temporarily inhabiting a material form. Near-death experiences, spiritual encounters, and reports of reincarnation echo this theme, offering tangible glimpses of what might lie beyond biological existence. Across cultures and centuries, humans have consistently reported experiences in which consciousness operates beyond the constraints of the body, suggesting a universal capacity for awareness to exist independently. Even ordinary experiences hint at this possibility. Moments of profound intuition, déjà vu, or sudden insight can feel as though awareness taps into something larger than the individual mind. While these experiences are subtle, they point to the mind's capacity to perceive beyond ordinary sensory input. If consciousness can exist in altered, expanded, or non-ordinary states while the body is still active, it is not unreasonable to consider that it may also survive the body entirely. The cumulative evidence, reincarnation, near-death experiences, astral projection, meditation, terminal lucidity, and mystical reports paints a picture of consciousness as persistent, resilient, and flexible. Awareness can operate beyond the body, retain memory and identity, perceive non-physical realities, and interact with dimensions of existence inaccessible through ordinary sensory channels. The body provides a framework for interaction with physical reality, but it is not the origin or totality of consciousness. If these possibilities are true, the implications are staggering. Life may extend far beyond the apparent limits of the body. Death may not be a cessation of awareness, but a transition to another form of existence. Identity, memory, and subjective experience may persist, evolving and interacting in ways beyond current comprehension. Consciousness may be a primary phenomenon, fundamental to reality, capable of existing across multiple lifetimes, dimensions, or substrates. This perspective also transforms our understanding of reality itself. If awareness can exist independently of the body, then the universe may contain levels of consciousness beyond ordinary perception. Reality may be shaped as much by awareness as by matter, and the physical world may be one expression of a deeper, underlying awareness. The body is a vehicle, not the source. The mind is resilient, adaptable, and potentially eternal. In exploring mystical, spiritual, and anomalous experiences, we see that consciousness demonstrates extraordinary capabilities. It can detach, observe, travel, persist, and interact in ways that transcend the body. It can carry memory and identity across lifetimes, survive neurological collapse, and perceive realities beyond ordinary sensory channels. The evidence suggests that awareness is not strictly material, but may exist independently, capable of navigating dimensions of existence that remain largely unexplored. Everything we take for granted, our identity, our experiences, our sense of physical presence, may be only one aspect of a far broader existence. The body, so central to everyday life, may be merely a temporary vessel, a point of interaction with the physical world, while awareness itself continues independently. This perspective challenges centuries of assumptions and invites us to imagine a universe in which the mind is fundamental, persistent, and flexible. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is not tied to your physical form. You could perceive, think, and experience in ways completely independent of your body. The limitations imposed by biology, illness, aging, even death, would no longer define the boundaries of awareness. Memory, thought, and identity could persist, evolving and interacting with realities beyond what we currently recognize. Life might not end when the body ceases to function. Instead, awareness could continue, unbound and enduring, in dimensions or forms we have yet to comprehend. Near-death experiences, out-of-body phenomena, meditation, lucid dreaming, and reports of reincarnation all hint at this possibility. They suggest that consciousness is capable of perceiving without the body, navigating realities outside ordinary sensory experience, and retaining memory and identity despite physical constraints. Even quantum theories and studies of extreme neurological states support the idea that awareness may be non-local and fundamental, a phenomenon that is not confined to neurons, synapses, or physical substrates. In this framework, death is no longer a definitive end, but a transformation. The cessation of biological function may mark only the conclusion of one mode of existence, while consciousness persists in another form. Memories, identity, and self-awareness could continue, existing in ways that are undetectable by our current scientific instruments. If this is true, then our understanding of life, mortality, and the universe must expand to accommodate a reality where awareness is enduring and independent. The implications extend beyond individual experience. If consciousness can exist without the body, then reality itself may be shaped in part by awareness. Our perception may not merely record reality, it may interact with and even influence it. Quantum experiments hint at this possibility, suggesting that observation can alter outcomes, and perhaps that consciousness itself is a fundamental component of the universe. The physical world may be one manifestation of a deeper reality in which awareness operates freely, unconstrained by the material. Such a perspective reframes the concept of identity. The self is no longer defined solely by a particular body, brain, or lifetime. Identity could be seen as a pattern of awareness, a dynamic, evolving phenomenon capable of surviving, adapting, and interacting across multiple dimensions or substrates. If consciousness persists beyond the body, then personal experience may be a temporary lens through which awareness engages with the physical world rather than the totality of existence. In this sense, you are not simply your body, your brain, or even your lifetime. you are the awareness that experiences and transcends all of these forms. The flexibility of consciousness is also evident in altered states of awareness. Meditation, lucid dreaming, deep sleep, and mystical experiences all demonstrate that the mind can perceive, reflect, and navigate realities without relying on the body's ordinary sensory input. In these states, the sense of self can dissolve, boundaries between observer and observed blur, and awareness can experience profound clarity and insight. These experiences reveal that consciousness has a resilience and adaptability far beyond what biology alone would suggest. Even technological advances hint at the potential for awareness to exist independently of the body. Mind uploading, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence suggest that consciousness may one day be instantiated in non-biological forms, preserving identity, memory, and self-awareness. If awareness can persist digitally, it reinforces the idea that the body is optional, not essential. Consciousness becomes an enduring phenomenon, capable of functioning in multiple forms, realities, or dimensions simultaneously. Spiritual and mystical traditions across cultures support this vision. Shamans, mystics, and philosophers have long described consciousness as a persistent entity, capable of traveling beyond the physical body, interacting with other forms of awareness, and perceiving realities hidden from ordinary perception. Near-death experiences, astral projection, and reports of past lives echo these themes, providing experiential evidence of a mind that exists independently of biological constraints. Across time and culture, awareness demonstrates resilience, continuity, and adaptability, hallmarks of an existence that transcends the body. The survival of consciousness beyond the body also reframes our understanding of mortality. If awareness continues, then death is not annihilation, but transition. The end of physical function may be the closing of one chapter, while consciousness moves into another state of existence. Memory, perception, and identity may persist, potentially experiencing dimensions of reality inaccessible to those bound solely by biology. In this view, life is not limited to the duration of the body, and existence extends far beyond what we currently recognize. Moreover, awareness independent of the body challenges conventional notions of time and space. Reports of non-local perception, remote viewing, and near-death experiences suggest that consciousness may operate outside ordinary temporal and spatial constraints. If awareness is not bound by physical laws, then existence itself may be more fluid and expansive than previously imagined. The universe could be a vast landscape of experience in which consciousness navigates freely, interacting with forms and dimensions far beyond the limits of the material. Identity, memory, perception, and experience become aspects of a larger, persistent phenomenon. The body is a temporary interface, necessary for interaction with the material world, but not for the existence of awareness itself. Consciousness is the observer, the experiencer, the entity capable of persisting beyond physical limitation. This realization reframes the way we think about life, death, and reality, inviting a vision of existence in which awareness is enduring, flexible, and ultimately primary. Even ordinary experiences hint at this broader capacity. Intuition, moments of profound insight, déjà vu, and vivid dreams may represent glimpses of consciousness operating beyond the immediate confines of the body. While subtle, these phenomena suggest that awareness has a capacity to perceive, process, and reflect independently. If awareness can function beyond the body in these small ways, it is not unreasonable to consider that it may continue after death, retaining memory, identity, and perception. The cumulative evidence from science, philosophy, mysticism, and personal accounts paints a picture of consciousness as resilient, flexible, and enduring. Awareness can detach from the body, perceive realities beyond ordinary experience, retain identity and memory, and potentially survive physical death. The body is not the source of consciousness. It is a vehicle, a temporary interface for experiencing the material world. The mind is the persistent entity, capable of navigating realities beyond our immediate perception. If this is true, then the universe is far stranger, deeper, and more mysterious than we normally perceive. Consciousness may be fundamental to reality, shaping it as much as it is shaped by it. Identity may persist across lifetimes, forms, and dimensions. Death may not be an end, but a transition to a new mode of existence. The body is only one point of interaction with reality, while awareness itself endures, perceives, and navigates realities beyond physical limitation.